Thank you, Professor Manuel. As you said, it's a very rich lecture. We have seen different topics, and I think most impressive topic to me, I think, is the different perspectives on world relations, as you indicated. And I also noted that you mentioned trade war and the Cold War in early modern period. Something as said, the history repeated itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I give the floor to questions. Professor Manuel is an old friend of us, so don't be shy.
But I'm still young, although I'm
an old friend means old. A friend for a long time.
Yes, that's good.
Thank you, Professor, for your very enjoyable lecture. I study philosophy, so I learned a lot from you from history today. So I'm very curious about your slide.
Which one?
You examine the Ulun from the Confucian tradition, let us say, and so you put the diagram with the concentric circles, and so you were explaining to us that perhaps this is a way that maybe China thinks about the ethics of international relations, right? So I'm very curious. Why is it that you chose the ruler subject to be in the center of the circle? So I understood that perhaps the friendship is on the outside because they are the least affectionate relations. But why would you choose the ruler and subject to be in the center? Does that mean that it is the most important relation or the most affective relation, the one with greatest love and kindness?
Yeah, because it's somehow like, things are comparable. We can compare things, It's like the model of the hierarchical model, is the king, the nobility, the artisans, merchants, peasant, or the ordinary people, the king, and of course, invested, because here we are talking about the divine monarchy. This is a concept here about the Tianxia, and here we are and the king is invested, this, of course, it's an obvious thing, by Pope. So by the grace of God, you are ruler, absolute ruler of a Catholic monarchy, and it's a very hierarchical system. Here is also a very hierarchical, and I use, for the case of international relations, of course, in the center is the emperor, the son of heaven, ruling the whole society. And of course, I put it in because that is the five relation system, in the different, let's say, groupings of society. And of course, I put in on top the superior position, love and kindness, because here we can make a comparisons. Would be really nice for a nice, in terms of philosophy, that would be really nice for a PhD. Compare, this, of course, but comparing Mencius, the virtuous ruler, with Machiavello, the good prince. That would be nice, right? Because another thing I didn't mention, why I put this, for two reasons. I make an analogy with, I make an analogy, I didn't explain this much, with the hegemonic or the fragmentary or the hierarchy in terms of priorities of China's today international relation. What is the top priority of China? Dispute with hegemonic power, Japan, US, with the case of Europe or Asian countries, establishing strategic relations, and for Latin America, Middle East, Africa, they use this rhetoric about friendship, harmonious relations. So we can make a scale, or let's say the same division, or like this volume here, we can apply this volume for the concept of strategic relation, the natural position of each nation in the Sinocentric world, being China being the middle kingdom in the center. So, and using the concept of soft power. What I didn't, but I mentioned to you now as a reflection, precisely going through this concept, that would be a really beautiful, that would be a really nice, beautiful PhD dissertation, comparing Mencius, the virtuous ruler, with Machiavelli, the good prince. So at the end, what I put here is the concept of the power theory, which power accumulation as an antagonist concept for a state capacity. So more power accumulation, authoritarian interventionist state entail a weak governance. So just look at today, precisely the dynasty based on military force, and the whole, since the beginning of the Qing dynasty in 1644 until the very end, the Boxer Rebellion of the Qing was overthrown in 1911. But during the whole Qing dynasty, all rebellions, uprisings, local conflicts. So the whole dynasty, even though was expanded territory double or triple, acquired Western lands in the Turkestan, Mongolia, Manchuria, but the whole kingdom was set in a very to contain the new minorities that was incorporated to the empire, but basically to the Han dynasty, the Han community that never recognized the Qing, and they are always claiming the big Daming War, the great kingdom of the Han. So they never recognized this. So applying this concept like the Wulong for the concept of the strategic relation with different external powers. But here is about the extent of, and also the meaning of the power accumulation. How is the state capacity of a state that they are keep concentrating power and not precisely applying the concept like Mencius, the virtuous ruler, or the concept of the good prince by Machiavelli. So are we governing for the well-being of society? Of course, the definition of power, those rulers are not for the well-being of people and society. That is also some anthropological dimension of the meaning of power, which is something, that develop despotic authoritarian regimes. But yeah, I was trying to make this analogy, because at the end, what powers really matter on the system, and also the proximity on any efficient equilibrium between different agents. So I try to make this analogy with the Wulong, because at the end, when we are talking about nation, we are talking about people behind those nations. It's not an abstract thing. It's like we are here sitting on the table, and how can we make an agreement? How can we make an agreement now? Imagine now people in they were having meetings in, I think it was in Dubai, Russia, Ukraine or Crimea. So people sitting on the table, okay, let's make a peace deal. So at the end, it's not nation, it's about, and those agreements would be better implemented between the relations of people, like who is the president of the, we cannot go to that debate, but president of Russia, US, if you have a good dealing, then we can make agreement. And of course, we know that those agreements are better done under the table. So, but it's about personal relations, what really matters here. So that's why I make the analogy about the Wulong thing. I don't know, guys. Does it make any sense to you, Jarek?
I have a question about the origin of this expansionism, Chinese expansionism approach. During the Ming Dynasty, it seems to be that China, until Ming Dynasty, and still until Qing, as you mentioned, they were focusing on how to keep the minorities and majorities, different nationalities, the different ethnic groups, right, together as one country, 中国 as one country that was the idea of already almost 2000 years, right, as the unified China. But the focus was more, it seems to be on exactly Tianxia, keeping the integrity of of China's country. The concern was mainly centered on the country as such. When this shift took place, when China started to think as something implementing or applying this concept of Tianxia, which is very ancient concept, but actually was not so much elaborated throughout the history. We know that President Xi Jinping with this project Belt and Road in 2015, historically, let's say that was some kind of origin of this project. But I think my intuition is, as based on what you said, it started much earlier. Was it not related to the fact that China was actually invaded and governed by non-Han Chinese that started to become more open to this internationalization and the politics of entering into some kind of relationship with other countries up to the point of thinking about expansion? Is not still not at the early stage of Qing dynasty, but it was somehow the beginning of it. I'm referring also to the fact that China as the country was never invaded before Mongols, right? Mongols were the first one, and it was the biggest shock for Chinese people to be invaded by Mongols, which brought with them that idea of globalization. I think looking at, I mean, becoming one big empire beyond China as such. So then the second, non-Chinese, Manchus, right? We have the second moment in the history. So I'm wondering if this historical tragedy, so to speak, historical tragedy was not a kind of impulse for the Chinese to think beyond their centralization, focus on China as such.
Yeah, actually, you know, what you mentioned, when China could expand more, because, you know, was invaded by the Mongols, and there is always the concept about the external is the barbarian, right? Considered as a barbarian. So when, yeah, it's a very good question. When really could we define the turning point of internationalization? Because that is a good question even to ask for today. What is the true meaning of internationalization? And I keep thinking, for instance, in our role, we are working in university. When universities been truly internationalized in China, so that is a very, well, I put myself, you know, to that question you are making, that we come back, we go back in time like 6, 7 centuries. We can see this question. You know, we are still somehow inherited in the spirit of not Marco Polo but Ricci. Yeah, Ricci's spirit is, yeah. I do believe this because, you know, we are still in many instances pioneers, and also in what happening in the past 5 years that we have a reversal. I think that 85% of expatriates in China, they left. So we are now a very, very tiny spot, you know, that was before, during, and after the pandemic. So shrink the figure of expatriating in China. You know, when I arrived to, I tell my story, when I arrived to Beijing in 2011, I was in the first quota at Tsinghua University in Beijing that they made a postdoctoral program. Before 2011, there was no postdoctoral program. And I was in the first quota, and I was the first foreigner as a postdoc. And ever since, because last month I went back to Beijing, to Tsinghua, to see my friends, my old professors, and I asked them, how many foreign postdoc have you have guys inside there? No one. You are there still. So, it's we are, we are humble. We are Catholic. I'm Catholic, and our spirit is to be humble, of course. But our role has a point and a meaning. Like, we are, that is the missionary spirit, right? To go to a different world and try to expand your values on this. And again, within this little example, I can keep asking about 600 years ago, like your question. It only occurs to me, well, like maybe putting this map, this a really nice Macau map that you guys have this in the Macau historical archive. And this map was commissioned. You know who commissioned this map? Kanshi Emperor, just right after the Qing or Kanshi seized or conquest Taiwan. This is very nice map of Macau. You can see here, these are Manchu's banner. Somewhere here is the Matsu temple. Matsu goddess is the goddess of the seamen, that in the whole coast of China, you have seen this temple. St. Paul Cathedral is somewhere here. These are cannons in the fortifications. Because why Macau? Because Kanshi, why I mentioned the question of internationalization, because before Kanshi period, basically somehow like the case of Japan, Japan was closed for trade. We were really barbarians, even much more barbarian than for the Chinese. And before Kanshi, still trade was closed. So they Kanshi opened the 4 customs. You guys know the custom system in Jiangsu, Ningbo, Fujian, and Canton. 4 ports for expansion to international trade. Somehow is when maybe through consumption, through the basically end of Ming, early Qing dynasty, when we find these commodities in China, the huolongo that came from New Spain, from Mexico, at the end of Qing dynasty, corn, chili, silver monetized China economy. And actually that was one of the main causes, as I mentioned before, for the Opium War. And we made these typologies, American goods and also European goods. Wine, actually, Spanish, French, Portuguese wine. Remember, I don't know, Brian, if you remember when you and Sophia, like 6 years ago, you went to the Macau archive, remember to do the Excel project. So basically, those, when you guys were working on those Excel, you were working on the traders settled in Macau from Norway and Sweden, the Grill company. The catalog you were working is so-called GRE. So the Grill family, actually all these are the, well, here we cannot see well, but is the genealogy of this company, very rich and powerful one from Sweden that set in Canton and Macau, and they were precisely making a huge profit on business with the wine market, the introduction of red wine. So we can see internationalization. We can take about formal, official, through diplomacy, international relations, but the other internationalization that really happened through this consumption, through the circulation, basically is run by informal relations, not formal relations like international treaties, diplomats. So it's why I would say this, but let me finish with the map, because I think this is interesting. Actually, it's also very interesting for you guys because we are in Macau. And also these cannons in the fortification, you know who gave these cannons to Kangxi Emperor, who as a gift, as a tribute, to allow them, it was the Jesuit community. And the cannons, you know, the Chinese call them the Red Barbarians, because originally the cannons were sent by the Dutch in Batavia, in southeastern Asia. And because, you know, the Dutch, the anatomy, they have a beard and red, so the Chinese, or they call it the Red Barbarians. So what, you know, these are very nice. Yeah, we can say little internationalization. Maybe we can think about Kangxi period, but with cautious. Yeah, because you know, basically during his whole reign, Kangxi was fighting his own people. It was about factionalism. You know, there was very you know, serious fighting inside the court to claim the legitimacy for the throne. So, and that was the Achilles heel of the whole Qing dynasty.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Miguel, for this rich lecture, which help us to see the difference between the West and the East, China. And the history is a mirror, which will help us to see the development of our world today. So this is of the lecture, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.